Join me as we read true paranormal tales, real ghost stories read by a real human. Let's go. Story 1. The Masked Shadow Man. I have a ghost story that still haunts me to this day. I haven't posted anything on Reddit until now, but this is my friend's favorite ghost story of all time, so I thought I should share it. I was in my senior year of high school, around 2012, and I'd stayed up a bit too late watching Doctor Who. Oh, this must be a UK ghost story. Realizing it was late, I went to go to bed, and in an effort to get comfortable, I rolled over in my bed when I saw what looked like a silhouette of a person. It was wearing a mask and holding a kitchen knife, both of which weren't silhouetted. The mask looked like the evil cousin of the typical happy and sad theatre masks, but it had angry eyes with a large smile. I looked at this thing for what felt like ages, trying to make out what it could be in the dark. Sometimes a pile of clothes looks creepy in the dark. Maybe this was like that. I held my gaze on it as I reached for my lamp, only to see it disappear as I turned on the light. There was just an empty wall, nothing I could have mistaken it for. I told myself, out of sight, out of mind, and decided I would close my eyes, turn off the lights, and throw the covers over myself. I still needed to try and sleep after all. That's when I felt something thin and blunt pressing into the middle of my back, right where your bra would meet your spine. It pressed harder and harder, not letting up until it couldn't press any harder. My back was arched from the pressure, and I was frozen in fear. People tell me it could have been sleep paralysis. However, I have no history of it, and it was also before I even fell asleep. Usually sleep paralysis happens as you wake up, not as you get into bed. Eventually the pressure let up, and I was finally able to move again. Immediately I got up, turned on the light, and started looking around to see if one of my brothers had maybe pranked me. Both were dead asleep. My parents were dead asleep, and there was no sign of anything beside an insane knot in the center of my back. After that, I slept with my closet light on every night to shine a light on that very spot. 2-ish months later, that mask showed its face at the end of my dream, only for me to wake up to the sound of my dad trying to put out a fire in the attic right above my room. Our pipes were frozen, and he had a space heater in the attic trying to warm the pipes. To be safe, he was checking the space heater every 5 minutes. The fireman said the space heater had malfunctioned and proceeded to catch itself and everything around it on fire. Within 5 minutes, my dad was gone. It was too big to be put out. Your dad was gone? All of this happened immediately above where I saw the masked shadow person. I've never known how to explain all of this, but after we rebuilt the house, I never saw it again. I've had other supernatural experiences, but they were all harmless. This one was my first and the most intense of them all. Story 2. The little girl in my mother's bedroom. My wife has always found it strange, but I love supernatural horror movies. She says that I wouldn't feel that way if I'd experienced the things she has. I always kind of teased her about her hidden ability to see stuff, until an incident a few years ago that completely changed my outlook on life. We were at my mum's house, hanging out downstairs, when my wife decided to go upstairs for something. When she came back down, I could instantly tell something terrifying had happened, because she was breathing hard and she had tears in her eyes. But she was still trying her hardest to hide it. She didn't say anything until later that night when we were alone. She told me that she'd gone upstairs to get her phone from the bedroom, and when she was about to come downstairs, she could see into my mother's room, and she saw a little girl, clear as day. My eyes are welling up, and I actually have goosebumps telling this. She said it was a little girl that looked around 7 or 8, but that she said what really struck her was the fact that the little girl looked surprised and confused that she could see her. She stopped up the stairs, and they stared at each other for a good 15 seconds. She didn't bring it up to my mum or sister, who was 12 and downstairs with me, because she didn't want to scare them, knowing that they had to live here. The next day, I convinced her to tell my mum what had happened, against her better judgment. I know my wife, and she's not the type to make things up, so I wanted her to get it out for better or worse. So anyway, she starts telling my mum what happened, and as she was describing the little girl she saw, my mum completely froze for a few seconds, and then started to cry hysterically. After a while she said, "That's my sister, name. My mum was 10 when her 8-year-old sister drowned." I'm sorry to hear that. There are no pictures of her, and this was my wife's first time learning about this tragedy. Needless to say, this shook us all up for a while, and I no longer mess around or joke about anyone who says that they haven't experienced or have seen things. Edit to add info to the tragedy. To offer some more details on the tragedy, she had gone to the beach with the neighbours who fished, and some other people from a neighbourhood. I know it sounds weird, but we're talking about the 70s, so it wasn't out of the norm there and then. Anyway, the story goes that she got into a fight with an older neighbour boy, who was 12 at the time, about a crab. When it was time to leave a couple of hours later, they couldn't find her. They started questioning him, and he had pointed to where he last saw her. Her body was found in the exact spot. My mum is convinced to this day that the little boy murdered her sister. I think so too, actually reading that. She was the same age as him, and says he was always very evil. She thinks that the neighbours covered up his involvement because they were related to the little boy. Also, she couldn't go to the beach that day for whatever reason, so, as a protective older sister, she believes it would have never happened if she had gone. She still beats herself up over it. Something else that happened to me as a kid that I couldn't explain, but my wife made the connection after I told her. When I was little, up till around 8 or 9, I used to regularly wake up, sometimes with the sensation of someone strangling me. My eyes were wide open, but I couldn't breathe or move a muscle or scream, no matter how hard I tried. It usually lasted around 20 seconds. The strange thing was that it only happened when I was alone, never ever when someone else was in the room. My wife pointed out that it was probably her trying to tell me what had happened. She thinks the 12-year-old boy strangled and held her under the water. I'd never made that connection, but, true or not, it really had a profound impact on me. I'm tearing up just writing this. I don't know for certain if it's all related, but to be honest, the way this all came full circle for me was devastating. I now believe my mum that he had killed her, and this tragedy happened in 1974. Story 3. My first undeniable encounter, and I need advice. So I live outside Raleigh, North Carolina. My house is in a rural area that's close to a large white house. The big house, it says in brackets, not sure what that means. I'm assuming this land was all part of the plantation at point in one time. I'm not sure if this is relevant, it's just my intuition telling me that it is. I moved in here 3 days ago after moving across the country, living in a guest room with my cat, and having a hard time getting a proper spot to move to. This house is so awesome, in all as far as it's a semi-newly built house, 1988, and the renovation is nice, with a beautiful half-acre property and a really cool big screened-in porch. Everything I wanted. Except, ever since I'd been here, My cat started acting all wild, like running around like she did when she was young and making noises that I've never heard her make. Also hiding in places like her litter box or where she sleeps. She'll shove her face in the corner of the couch, and just things that she just doesn't normally do. She is a 14-year-old cat, and I've had her since she was a kitten. This is my first indication that something potentially paranormal could be going on. So, on the second night I was here, I was in my kitchen, and it sounded like someone was on the porch talking to themselves or other people, but under their breath. So, I opened the back door to see if anyone was out there. I didn't see anything, but I left the door open because I thought the air would be nice, since there's a screen on the porch. There would be no bugs or anything like that getting into the house. This is when I had my first encounter. I don't know if this is a ghost or what, but it's not like I see a person when I encounter it, but, for lack of better description, a large, blurry mass, roughly shaped like a human, kind of like the Predator invisibility camouflage from the movie is, but it's 100% something that is aware of his existence, aware of my existence, and aware of my cat's existence, and a very intense feeling. But I don't feel like I'm in danger, but it was the most intense experience I've ever had, because I didn't know what to do, as it was 1 inch from my face, and clearly showing its presence to me. It was completely undeniable, and I could see its location clear as day, even after it got really close to me on the first encounter, as I could see it moving from room to room, pretty slowly, and kind of like out of a curiosity. It definitely was not bothered by my presence, and I felt like it was annoyed that I was there. I didn't know what to do, and I said, "Oh wow, look, I have no problem with you, but I want you to get away from me and leave my house." I've never said things like this out loud like this if something is a little spooky or whatever in the past. I didn't feel like it was necessarily evil or wanted to cause any harm to me, even though the experience was extremely intense and scared the shit out of me, and my cat ran away immediately, confirming to me that she's been scared of this thing since we got here. But this leads me to my first question. 1. Does anyone think this entity is a ghost, or perhaps some kind of interdimensional predator or camouflage being? That's the one I would go with. I believe it's a ghost because the voices I heard and continue to hear are of an old woman. So the next day, I saw the same exact blurry thing 4 times in different places in the house in broad daylight. Looked the same, but wasn't as alarming, I guess. I talked to some close friends and family, and I was referred to a reputable place to get armed up with an ethically grown white sage plus cedar smudge kit in an abalone shell. Also, dragon's blood candles and a legit Archangel Michael's candle with actual white sage and lavender incense. My cat actually has a tiny wire wrap on her collar with citrine in it. That's cute. And I was told citrine can help in this situation. My cat wasn't wearing it during the first encounter, and since I put it on her, she seems way more relaxed. Could of course all be coincidental. When I got home from getting all of this stuff, it was still daylight, and I didn't see it anywhere or hear anything, so I decided to not smudge right away. It was suggested at the store that I try not to aggressively smudge the place, and since I felt like it wasn't in the house or active or whatever, I just started making some beats and just chilling out. I then went outside to smoke a cigarette on the back porch and heard someone moving around and talking quietly out there. Before I could go inside or even react, there were multiple of the same predator camouflage entities or beings, again, undeniably visible where they were at, even as they moved. There were 5 or 6 in total this time, and one was shorter than the original one, while the others were much taller. They went into every room and were constantly moving around. I lit the cedar and sage and told them that I have no ill will towards them, but I told them to leave my house. I said it non-aggressively, but sternly. I've never personally ever smudged before this, so I didn't really know what to do beyond going to every room. All signs of them were completely gone. I lit the St. Michael candle and then sat on my couch after burning the sage and cedar in every room. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by all of them again, but more intense this time, because I could feel them and it was almost like I was sitting inside of them. They followed me around every room I went to until I lit the dragon's blood candle. Their presence had become aggressive. So the next question is it possible for them to attach to the land rather than the house? And also, I'd be welcome to any advice or thoughts. P.S. As I've been typing this, I've seen one of them twice, but way less active. I look forward to hearing back. Honestly, I read a lot of stories on this channel, and that one is particularly interesting. Story 4. Sharing a weird ghost story from my childhood. When I was a kid, I lived in the last apartment of a building with no units above ours. Despite this, I would often hear strange noises coming from the ceiling. The sounds were typically hurried footsteps, followed by a sudden thud, and then what seemed like coins dropping onto the floor. Sounds were almost exactly the same as if they were recorded. One time, I even glimpsed a white figure passing by my bed in the same apartment, but that's a story for another time. As a kid, I was too afraid to ask my parents about the source of these noises. I believed that whatever it was causing the sounds heard us talking about it, but it would come after me. Also, my parents were the type to dismiss my complaints and sweep problems under the rug, so I kept silent the whole time. Years later, as an adult and after I moved out, I finally confronted my dad about the mysterious sounds. He told me that some poor guy from the building next to ours was being raided by the police. One day he tried to flee by running and jumping onto our building's roof. He failed and fell to his death. It matched with the sound pattern that I had heard every day for years. It's also a sad story, because my dad said the guy was just being arrested for some check-related issues, and it wasn't such a big case. It wasn't worth him losing his life over, and I hope he found peace.
Story 5, November 2021. So this is my first time sharing this online. I've been holding back from saying much, but I felt this was the time to do it. Keep in mind, I moved out of North Carolina to New York near the end of 2022. This happened around November of 2021 in Garner, North Carolina. North Carolina, being how it is when it comes to weather, it was a fairly warm night. I went to the neighborhood soccer field to go stargazing and to look at the full moon. The sky was clear and the moon was bright. It lit the field up nicely. After I set up my telescope, 20 minutes passed by with my back turned towards the neighborhood. I see a light dance to my left, so I turn around. A guard is doing their routine patrol and checking for intruders, so I think nothing of it and turn my attention back to the stars. Then I heard a noise that didn't sound human, or like an animal. A deep, guttural sound came from far behind me, and I turned to look again. It was the guard. It didn't feel right at all, and I turned back to start picking up my stuff. Then I hear footsteps getting closer, and the light was gone. "What a wonderful night, isn't it?" the voice asked. I turned to respond, but I noticed something was off. The figure stood straight, like a soldier in the military, feet together and arms to his side. "It is," was all I could muster. then continued gathering my telescope and bag. "What's your name?" the guard asked. The way he asked was unsettling. It sounded layered, as if there was another voice speaking along with his, curious yet menacing. "My name is Jackson," was all I could respond with, giving a fake name. I turned to face him, and then I noticed why it seemed off. The figure was wearing a guard's uniform, but it looked worn and tattered. Its skin was black as a void, and I tried to look at his face in the moonlight, but there was nothing. There was nothing but a smile, a big, menacing smile. "Nice to meet you, Jackson. My name is Mike," he said as he tilted his head to the side.
It's going to check that's creepy as hell.
Yes, it is. "Nice to meet you, Jackson. My name is Mike," he said as he tilted his head to the side, revealing that there was no other features but that insidious smile. I began walking toward the neighborhood, but when I walked past him, my spine felt like it was turning into ice. What followed made me terrified, and it was the smell of sulfur. "Have a wonderful night, Jackson," was the last thing I heard, and the act was slipping. The voice sounded more inhuman, and even when I gave him a fake name, it made it worse. I walked far enough away to where I can see the field and have a good distance away to see if he would return out from there. He never did. So, a few months later, it was February. I was on a nightly walk, and I stopped by the neighborhood office to visit the cat that resided there. While I was petting and playing with the little guy, a night guard stopped by to check on me to see if I was all right. I told him I was and who I was visiting as the cat was in my lap. Before he walked away, I asked him if there was anyone named Mike that worked there back in November. He asked why, and I explained what had happened around that time. Then he promptly went to go find me an answer. After a few more minutes, he came back and looked confused. There was no one named Mike that worked there around that time in November, and he looked just as confused as I did. Maybe a bit more horrified, considering that was his next area to check. We talked a bit more about how we both didn't like to mess with the paranormal, witchcraft, anything of the sort. Then we parted ways, leaving me more unnerved than I was previously. To this day, that night still freaks me out, sending bad chills down my spine whenever I remember the disturbing and sinister smile that pierced through the void that was its face.
Story 6. My story. I don't know if you'll believe me or not, but this is my story. Since I was young, I've been able to see ghosts. As I grew older, this ability never went away. I could still see them, especially when I travel and stay in hotels. There are always spirits watching us, and sometimes they even disturb us at night. One day, my elder sister brought me to a monk from Nepal who helped me to close my spirit eyes so that I wouldn't see ghosts anymore. Although my sight was closed, after a few years, I could still see and feel their presence. No matter where I go, I can sense them if they are around. But the story I want to share truly begins during a dark time in my life. In 2013, I was very down, deeply depressed, because I had discovered that my ex-husband was having an affair. During those 6 months, I attempted suicide more than 3 or 4 times. Maybe spirits that are invisible to most people could sense my sadness and my hopelessness, and they were perhaps drawn to me. My elder sister saw how unhappy I was and began bringing me to temples and Buddhist centers for chanting. At that time, I followed her everywhere. Whenever the temple organized charitable events like Release Mercy, also known as Fang Shen, releasing animals to save their lives, she would invite me to join her, and I always did, especially on weekends. One day, the temple organized a one-day Release Mercy trip to Batam, and we joined them. I still remember it was 1 week before the 7th lunar month, also known as the Ghost Month. We departed at 8 a.m. from Harbour Front Centre, and took the ferry to Batam with a group of people, including a few monks from Nepal. I was happy to be there with my sister, as we released fish, turtles, and many other sea animals into the ocean. We chanted, "On Mani Padme Hum." After that, we had lunch together at a restaurant, and then we visited a Taoist temple in Batam. Is it Tao? Is it Dao? Dao temple in Batam. The temple was quite big, and inside there was a master known as the Tanki, a spiritual medium. That day, many people received blessings from him, including us. For the blessing, the master would chant Taoist mantras and touch the head for men and for women, and he would bless the hand. My sister went first, followed by me. Something funny happened. I received both blessings, one on the head and one on the hand. My sister joked and said, "You're so special today, you might win 4D tonight." We laughed, but of course I didn't win. Looking back now, I believe that this master was my Guren, a noble person who appeared in my life to help me. I think he saw something in me that day, and in a way, I believe he truly saved my life. I'll continue my story soon. Please wait for the next part of my journey. Story 7. Part 2 of my story. After I came back from Batam, life went on as usual. I was busy with work and taking care of my children. One weekend, when I had a day off, I spent it with my kids. That day happened to be the first day of the Hungry Ghost Month, the 7th lunar month. I woke up around 7 a.m., went to the bathroom for a while, and then went back to sleep. That's when I had a dream. This dream had no color at all. Everything was in black and white, except for the people walking beside me. They were all dressed in the same milk-white clothes. I saw myself walking with them on a long wooden bridge. I asked one of them, "Where are you all going?" She answered, "We're going to do the Fang Sheng, the Releasing Mercy." I noticed they were carrying white plastic bags, and inside were fish. I believed them and continued walking alongside them. As we walked, I saw many naked men and women floating in the sea. When I looked up, there were no clouds, no sun, and no moon. Just the bridge, the sea, and some stones. Everything was still in black and white. After a while, I asked again, "Why haven't we reached yet? The bridge is so long, and I cannot see the end." The woman suddenly scolded me. "Don't ask so much. If you want to come along, just follow." So I kept quiet and continued walking. After a while, we saw a monk in a small wooden sampan holding a stick. All of us stopped and called out, "Sifu, Sifu, what are you doing here?" The monk replied, "No need to worry, I can come up." But suddenly, his stick fell into the water, and everyone shouted, "Oh!" The monk calmly said again, "It's okay, I can handle this situation." But then he fell from the sampan into the sea. All of us were so worried about him, but he reassured us again, "Don't worry, I can come up." Earlier, I mentioned that everyone was carrying bags, supposedly filled with fish. But at that moment, all of their bags suddenly fell into the sea, and to my surprise, they weren't carrying fish at all. Instead, they were filled with gold and silver joss paper, the kind we burn during the 7th lunar month. The paper transformed into lotus flowers that floated in the water and lifted the monk up. We looked up at him and shouted, "Whoa!" And the monk said, "I told you all not to worry about me. I'm fine." Suddenly, all the gold and silver joss paper in the water formed into a dragon that flew up into the sky like a firework. We were all so amazed and happy, watching it rise. Then, a phoenix followed, also soaring into the sky like firecrackers. At that moment, I woke up. It was already 11 a.m. Even though the dream felt short, I had actually slept for more than 4 hours. The dream left such a deep impression on me that I clearly remembered every detail. That night, I told my elder sister about it. She didn't know what it meant either. So she went and told her landlord. Her landlord's family had been people who knew how to read Bazi, the Chinese destiny chart. God, I hope I pronounced that correctly for Bazi, B-A-Z-I. And they had a stall at Burgess Street. After hearing the dream, they told my sister that it actually meant, "To be continued in part 3, please stay tuned." Part 3 evidently has not been written yet, but when they do write it, I will be sure to put it here. Story 8. A song on the radio. I was reminded of a moment from my past. Several years ago, I was in love with a fellow college student, and while he didn't return my love, he did care for me. 14 years ago, in 2011, he was killed in a car accident shortly after he finished college. That's terrible, and I'm terribly sorry to hear that you went through that. I was completely broken, and, as people thought I was crazy to love a man who didn't love me back, I never talked about him. Some months later, I was driving to work and listening to the radio when one of the newer songs from Nickelback, Lullaby, was requested by a caller. I learned later that the song was based on a childhood memory of the songwriters finding their babysitter crying over the recent death of her boyfriend in an accident. As I was listening, the chorus really stuck out. So just give it one more try for a lullaby and turn this up on the radio. If you can hear me now, I'm reaching out to let you know that you're not alone. And if you can't tell, I'm scared as hell, 'cause I can't get you on the telephone. Oh honey, here comes a lullaby, your very own lullaby. And I don't know how, and I don't know why, but I felt it was my love's way of telling me it was going to be okay. I had to pull over because I was crying too hard to drive safely. It's making me cry, and to this day, I'll turn on the radio and hear it playing, or I'll hear his voice saying, "Play it." The funniest part, while I like Nickelback, my love didn't think they were real music. He's not alone in that thought, but I've always actually had an unpopular appreciation of Nickelback, so here's to you. That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it. Story 9. I was just trying to smoke a cigarette, not witness some paranormal bullshit. I worked as a wilderness therapy guide for Primitive Skills Learning Program, spending weeks at a time leading kids through the backcountry, teaching survival skills, and making sure no one wandered off into oblivion. I can already tell it's going to be a good story. Every morning, my supervisor, named Jay, sent GPS coordinates for the next campsite. We would pack up our packs and move. I never knew exactly where we were headed until I got the text, except for this place. This was the only site I'd memorized, so I could avoid it. It was beautiful, sure. A massive boulder at the top of a very large, gradually sloping knoll that overlooked a valley. The earth was deep red clay that had been speckled with large hunks of alabaster. Plenty of juniper tree cover provided shade, and an anchor for setting up a shelter. The soft red sand made for easy sleeping, and the large sage bushes provided a wealth of useful items. A wash of cottonwood trees stretched down to the east, and in the distance was framed by pink and white mountain ridges. It was a visually stunning sight, but something about it set off what I call my dog vibe, the deep primal instinct that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I don't like to admit it, but I can be a huge, whiny baby. I'm tall, built like a brick shithouse, and I spent my days hiking miles through brutal desert terrain. I felt tough, but this place, it made me feel bite-sized. I'd spent one sleepless night at this site prior, and there was something that gave the air a heavy feeling. And the surrounding geological structures created a strange impact on sound. This was the one location in the field where sounds would become heavily distorted. After setting foot in this place for the first time, I drew a big red X over the site on my map and jotted down the direct chords so that I could avoid this place later down the line. Nothing exceptional happened the first night I stayed there. It was just my dog vibe telling me to run. That morning, I sat by the fire, boiling water with pineapple skins for tea, when my GPS pinged. I checked the coordinates that had been sent to my inReach. From just the degrees I knew, I didn't even need to read the minutes and seconds. I dreaded where we were going. My supervisor had sent a message with the coordinates. "Sorry, dude, I know. That motherfucker." I showed my co-staff Steve the screen. He took one look and burst out laughing. "What did you do to piss Jay off?" Jay, our supervisor, was a good buddy of ours. After calling the office to request a location change, I was informed that apparently we'd been hiking too fast, catching up to the other groups, so they had to divert us. There was no other choice, and of course, we got sent straight to my least favorite place. The hike was a mild 8 miles, but by the time we arrived, the sun was setting, casting streaks across the technicolor clouds above the horizon, and the warm October air rustled in the treetops. We set up camp beneath a cavernous rocky outcrop at the apex of this hill. The campsite was a little less than a mile from the nearest service road. By the time we'd finished setting up camp, kid shelter, staff shelters, fire pit, and sump, and chose a safe location to hang our food bags for the night. I'm assuming, reading this as probably for bears, in America maybe. It was time to set the kiddos up for a good, nice hot meal. Every individual made their own food, but the food was always better hot. Only on the worst nights would you go to bed without a fire, and I would never stay at this site without one. The boys were absolute powerhouses when it came to firewood collection, which made my life easier. We had the perfect system. Every night, each person would try to find and carry as much wood as you physically could, and the winner would get to lead our hike the next day. We were so efficient at collecting wood that every morning we had to scatter the pile as an LNT, leave no trace measure, which earned staff bonus pay if done correctly. And at that point in my life, I'd do most anything for those few extra bucks. The wood was collected, the camp was set, and the sun dipped deeper behind the mesas on the horizon. The boys started busting a coal for the fire. The only sound was the high-pitched screech of the bow drill kit filling the air. That was when I felt it. The eyes. This part of the desert was full of life. Elk, deer, coyotes, raccoons, and smaller rodents. No cattle, though. They never came out this far. I figured it was some scavenger waiting to comb the desert sands for dinner scraps. The night moved along, and we all had sat down to feast on our dinner and talk about our days. Part of the program was telling a fable or parable at some point of the day, and having our group discuss about it. After everyone had finished cleaning their pots and hanging their pristinely packed food bags high in the trees, we stoked the fire and began our group discussion. At this point, the world had been engulfed in darkness, and we could only see what the fire was illuminating. It was during this time that I felt an exponential increase in that feeling of being watched. It started once we put our bags down, but this was way too much. I slowly scanned the surroundings to find the source of my unease. My eyes landed on a large sagebrush, a distance from a fire directly from me. Then I saw them. A pair of eyes peering from behind a sagebush. The firelight reflecting in the pupil. Only they weren't animal eyes, they were definitively human. Adrenaline slammed into my chest. That was a real-life person watching me, watching Steve, watching the kids. I launched myself across the fire into the brush, flailing my arms and yelling in a low, deep, and loudly as I could. After assaulting the poor shrubbery, Jay rolled out from behind the bush in stitches. That motherfucker. He had parked his jeep 2 miles away and had hiked in just to scare me. And it worked. I was not laughing. In fact, I had become a little bit of a spoilsport as I berated him for his poor life choices. I had to, he told the boys. This is her least favorite sight. I couldn't resist. Oh, it's good to know the reader here is actually a girl. It's interesting. We spent the rest of the night joking around. The kids cackling because they could never imagine what I would do when I was scared. After a while, the little dudes went to sleep, and Steve, Jay, and I stayed by the fire, discussing the group's progress. Then, around 1 a.m., Steve went to bed, and Jay turned to me. You want to go on a little hike? We walked 30 miles up a ridge, following the service road to a little vista overlooking the entire valley. The desert stretched out below, reflecting silver in the waxing gibbous moonlight. Jay, being Jay, pulled out a pack of contraband cigarettes, massive no-nos in the field. But I was a filthy nicotine rat and not about to say no. If my supervisor wanted to give me contraband, fine by me. We sat on a rock, backs to the road, lighting up. We talked about everything, while taking long drags. We were on our second cancer stick, when from down the hill we saw headlights. A pair of round, white, yellow lights appeared over the ridge, climbing the incline 500 yards away. There was something about this set of lights that sent my dog vibe into hyperdrive. There was a pit in my stomach, but I thought it was just the anxiety being caught red-handed with a cigarette. At this hour, it could only be a few things, and assuming from a headlight shape, it looked to be a jeep. It was probably the vehicle of a hunter scoping out the best spot to land their tag, or perhaps someone lost. I remember that it couldn't have been a company vehicle. We would have known if the company's transport vehicles were coming out to meet us. So the anxiety should have left at this point. But it was just increasing, ever so slightly. Something was off. The car wasn't making a sound. No engine, no tires on dirt, no brakes squeaking, and in the desert, you could hear everything. The lights gradually floated forward, stopping 50 yards away. We shielded our eyes against the glare. We kept smoking. If it was someone from our company out this late, they would have been one of our friends who wouldn't care. And maybe, just maybe, it was in someone who needed directions. Then, as we got up to walk towards them, the lights moved back. Still, 50 yards away. We kept approaching, but the distance between us and the car stayed exactly the same. We paused our advance, taking in what we were looking at, and noticed the road curved left, descending down the hill. But the headlights? They were dead ahead. They were not following the road. This vehicle was not following the road. I started to become angry, as this area is well known for its cryptobiotic soil, and it is known that you tiptoe on the crypto if you have to touch it at all. How could someone be so obtuse that they would obliterate a colony of microorganisms that had been building its fortress for decades, up to hundreds of years? I regained focus of what was happening, and waved my arms up to signal the vehicle to stop. I looked down at where we were standing to see if maybe they'd lost the road backing up. I wanted to follow the tire tracks to see if any damage was done. And where we were standing now, the headlights had been. I focused on the ground, but only saw Jay and my footprints from our earlier hike. No tire treads, no marks. Jay saw what I was doing and tried to scan the surroundings ground for tread prints. As we were doing this, the lights did not move. In fact, they hovered perfectly still. There was something about this situation. Might have been related to my prior adrenaline dump earlier in the evening, where I felt the most dread and impending doom I have ever felt. Tears started flowing from my eyes, but I had no way to control them. I was not sad. Maybe it was because of the fear? I grabbed Jay's arm, and he looked at me, but neither of us spoke. We were each planning what to do next in our heads, thoughts moving far too quickly to try and say anything out loud. The lights split apart. One veered left, the other right. They drifted slowly into the open desert, bobbing slightly up and down as they faded, and the desert swallowed them whole. After standing in silence, acknowledging that we'd both seen it and we were not insane, we turned back towards camp, hyper-vigilant as hell. As we passed the spot where the lights had vanished, a startlingly large owl seemed to materialize out of the dark, swooping silently over our heads. Jay flinched hard. Ha! Fucker! I believed this was the universe paying him back. I'd never seen him react like that. I wasn't scared of animals, but Jay looked like he'd just seen a ghost. The chatting that we'd been doing prior to seeing the owl had ended, and we made it back to the camp in silence. I crawled into my bag next to a snoring Steve, and Jay grabbed his pack, set up his little nook fairly close to ours. I don't remember drifting into sleep, but I do remember waking up to sounds of Scrub Jays chirping in the trees above us. In the early morning, before the kiddos woke up, Jay, Steve, and I roused the fire before it was time to send Jay on his way. As a gentle woman I am, I walked Jay back up to his jeep. Once we were far enough from camp, I broke the silence. What the actual fuck happened last night? Jay didn't laugh. I've seen some weird shit before, he admitted. 4 years in the field. And yeah, I'm superstitious as hell. I'm just glad we got back in one piece. But I can see why you don't like it here. And that's when he told me about owls. They're an omen of death, you know. But not bad luck necessarily, he said. At least in my culture. I reached forward and gave him a quick hug while saying, "Welp, thanks for coming out last night, man. I'm sorry for launching myself before realizing who you were." He laughed, remembering how he provoked me to Hulk smash a sage bush and that eased the tension. After a few minutes of joking, we parted ways. There was another week of hiking till I finished my shift, but it was uneventful and nothing strange or weird happened. I still think about this every now and then, but I never stopped wondering. There were no tire tracks, no sound, just lights in a desert that shouldn't have been there. Story 10. The Hand. In 1998, I was living in a temporary shelter with my son. I'm not going to reveal the exact location. I will say that it was in a lovely old Victorian neighborhood. The shelter itself was not old. It was built in the 1950s. It was very nice. I actually really enjoyed staying there. It appeared to be neat and clean. It felt very safe to me, and my son was about to turn 4 years old. We slept on a double-sized mattress bed, very plain, in a modernish cement and brick public non-profit with a smooth cement floor. Private room, shared bathroom. Super quiet. One evening, my son told me that he was afraid of going to sleep. I asked him why, and he said, That's when a hand comes out. Then he said, as I gently tried to reassure him that it was only me, he said, No, Mummy, I look at you and you're asleep. He told me that he was scared because a hand would press on his back and talk to him. He said that it scared him because he turned his head to look, but no one was there. Poor baby, I can't imagine now, typing this, how scary that must have been. I asked him what the voice said. He shrugged his shoulders. Because he was so little, I kind of got the jest that it was simple questions that he would ask a child. He was scared because he never saw who was touching his back or who was talking to him. He seemed to forget all about it, and we moved shortly after. Fortunately, no ill effects and no danger. He does not remember it, so that's good. I genuinely felt safe there. I did not experience or feel anything, and I told my son that I was sorry. I was not able to sense what he was experiencing. I just listened to him and tried to reassure him about it. However, I have no clue whatsoever. Story 11. Hello, from an old friend. Last winter, I was randomly driving when I became puzzled. Why was I suddenly remembering a former classmate, someone who I only knew very briefly in 7th grade? I was 60 years old now. He was in my class. His name was Greg, and he had wild, longish black hair with fair skin. He invited me over to his house one day after school. We were alone. He tried to make a pass at me, so I left, turned him down, and went home. I do not remember ever really seeing him again after that, so why on earth did I suddenly think of him? I was about to find out. I got on Facebook a few days later, or maybe a week later. I decided to look at my old high school page online. I now live in a different state. I've not been anywhere near that high school, probably since around 2008, and then it was just a visit. Anyway, I see some posters were displayed during a reunion. There, on Classmates We've Lost, I see it. Greg. He was dead. I googled and found his memorial online and gleaned some info. His mother had written it. She mentioned how Greg loved living in Hawaii. I was stationed in Hawaii, the same time that he was nearby. Greg died in a state where I now live. He passed away around the time that I had gotten settled here. I have zero clue why Greg would randomly reach out to me, of all people, to say hello from the beyond. But I wish him peace, and I have no idea how he died. Story 12. Ghost fear became ghost reality. I've always had paranormal experiences growing up, from my grandfather coming to me in a dream the night he died, to a little girl ghost talking to my friends in Lamard, Italy. But I never had a fear of the paranormal until we moved back to Maine in 2015. I will say, as the reader here, but just ask Stephen King. There is something inherently about Maine. It's a very paranormal place. When we moved back, we moved to a quiet and quaint town of 600 people that was established in 1772. When we purchased the log cabin, our realtor told us that one of the common expenses for buying was verifying that the home/property was not on burial grounds. We paid the $65 and thought, odd, but Maine is old. Fast forward a few months. And every time I woke at night to use the potty, there was a woman dressed in black, dripping wet with long black hair. Her hauntings kept up until we left. However, they resumed in our new home, which was located dozens of miles away in another county. Every night, between the bedroom and the bathroom door, she stood guard, always ready to harass and startle me. Finally, I told my spouse about it. Thankfully, he believed me, and we actually moved a third time. But not after blessing us, the old place and the new place. Since moving to our new home, everything has been quiet. So, can you imagine my shock, horror, disbelief when this past autumn, 3 years after leaving the last haunted cabin, we were watching The Dead Files. And on comes an episode about Starks. When Amy drew a photo of an all-wet, dressed in black poltergeist surrounding nearby neighbor's bed, it looked like I had seen the ghost all over again. I was gaunt, nauseated, and seething with jaw-dropping anxiety. The photos depicted the haunting I had seen, both in Starks, less than 500 yards from the house in the Dead Files, and New Portland. That's actually amazing. I believe this is a legitimate haunting. To this day, we still don't drive past either place for fear she may still be lingering and follow me again. Validating, scary, and bewildering. That's a great story. Story 11. Please help us understand what we saw. So around 11:30 tonight, my boyfriend and I were leaving his house. We pet his dogs, as usual, and said goodbye. This is important just to note, that all his dogs were accounted for. Mac was inside. We said goodbye to Baby, Sandy, and Little Bit. We all saw them. So my boyfriend lives on a private road, so basically everyone knows everyone. And his parents have been there for 10 years, and no new people have come. Just thought it was important to add, considering I'm not sure what we saw. So if there's a new animal around, it's noticed pretty quick. As people talk, literally the moment a stray comes up, they will talk about it. So, as we were pulling out, we saw eyes glowing about 50 feet away. My boyfriend thought it was a bunny of some sort or animal or something like that. Not to mention all the dogs were looking in that direction, so generally curious. So he pulled around so his headlights would shine on it. This thing did not look normal. It was too big to be a cat, too small to be a deer, too small to be a pig. But, with that being said, if it were any of those things, it would have ran away from a light, like most animals you won't do. So at first, it went into the wooded area, but then it turned around, like it started inching towards us slowly, but it would sit down after every step it took. Shoulders didn't look in the right place. To me, it looked like it was walking on its back legs. My boyfriend says he saw it on all fours, so I'm not sure if it was both. This happened about 4 times before we drove off, due to fear. The way it moved wasn't natural. It had glowing yellow eyes, black slick coat. The coat was almost shiny, and almost looked as if it was contoured or walking strange. It almost resembled a dog, but it wasn't. I'm not sure, and I still can't explain what we saw. Anyways, fast forward, probably a detail I should have put at the beginning, but the whole reason we went to his house was because he was spending a night at mine and he'd forgotten his clothes. He forgot his clothes? Hopefully he had some. So, when we left my house, I left a gate open. The important thing to note here is that I live with my grandparents, who are disabled. This is important because my driveway is about 150 yards long, if not longer. At the time we left and left the gate open, my grandparents would be asleep and wouldn't have shut the gate. I know this because I've done this before, and usually try to make sure the gate is shut before I wake up in the morning. But yeah, the gate was shut, and my boyfriend and I were already quite shaken from what we saw, so we literally turned around, and now I'm writing this in the parking lot. So if you have any ideas, please let me know. We just want to know if it's something we need to look out for, or if it can be chopped up to something else. Also, feel free to ask questions if you feel there is more important information needed. Thanks. Also, I thought I should add, all of the cats in the area are orange and white. The only dark-colored cat is Molly, and she stays inside 24/7. And again, it was way too big to be a cat.
If you made it this far, thanks for listening and good night.